Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's session. We are so lucky to be joined today by someone who really needs no introduction, Mr. Ruskin Bond, one of India's most beloved and most well-known authors. And he's here to talk about his new book, How to Be a Writer, which, as the title suggests, if you've ever dreamed of becoming an author, this is the book you want to read. It's full of advice, tips, and anecdotes from his incredible writing career that has spanned over 70 years. Mr. Bond, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction. I just got up from my afternoon siesta, and so if I look a bit drowsy, please forgive me. Um, Actually, to tell you the truth, the secret of being a successful writer is to have an afternoon siesta every day. At least 1 or 2 hours in the afternoon, you must go to sleep, dream if you must, but definitely have a rest. So that's my first tip for writing. But thank you for having me. It's a bit daunting when I heard that we are going live on Facebook. Uh, but I hope to at least satisfy your curiosity, answer a few questions from aspiring writers and others. And it's really amazing that there are so many young people and old people who want to write books and stories and memoirs and all sorts of things nowadays. And this wasn't always the case, because I remember the year I finished school, donkeys years ago, and I came home and my mother said, "Well, Ruskin, what are you going to do with yourself now?" And I said, "Mom, I'm going to be a writer." And she said, "Don't be silly, go and join the army." In those days, most of the boys out of school went into the army. Um, but I think the army would have got just another Beetle Bailey if I'd gone into it. And the thought of getting up early in the morning and going on parade and doing morning exercises was frightened me off anyway. So I became a writer. And here I am, 70 years later, still a writer. So how can I help you?
So, sir, we're just wondering if you talk about your experiences and what made you a writer, and what were those things that made you feel like writing in the first place?
Right, it all started at school um, when I became a bookworm, really. I was a bookworm from an early age. I loved reading. So I read all kinds of books, ranging from the classics to the current writers of that age and humorous writers, children's writers. And so even before I'd finished school, I had made up my mind that I was going to be a writer. So my people asked me who inspired me. So I said, really, books inspired me. Other writers inspired me. And it wasn't easy in those days to make a living from writing, especially in India, because we didn't have many publishers then. There were school book publishers, textbook publishers, but hardly any who brought out, say, novels or books for children or storybooks, things like that. So I had to really, since I wanted to make writing my profession, I had to write for magazines and newspapers. And that I did, which is why I've done so many short stories. Because in those days, in the 1950s, 60s, a lot of magazines did publish fiction, short stories. So I wrote, that's why I've written hundreds of them. They just accumulated over the years. And now they've gone into books as collections. Um, so it was only in the 1980s that sort of publishing came of age in India, and some publishers like HarperCollins, Penguin, and others came in And our own publishers like Rupa began publishing in a big way. And then it became easier to publish books in India, to make some money out of them. And that's why today we have so many young, successful authors publishing in India, publishing abroad, but no longer finding it necessary to go abroad to publish a book. You can do it here. You can be successful here. You can make some money here. You can be a writer, either a part-time writer or a full-time writer. So there is, I've been doing it for many years. And this little book, How to Be a Writer, I thought, well, so many youngsters come to me with, or write to me with questions and asking me for tips or suggestions. And so I thought, well, let me put it all together in a little book, and maybe then I won't have to answer so many letters and calls. I don't mind if they still keep coming in. It's nice to have readers.
Exactly. And let me tell you one thing here. So we've got about 2,000 and more of your fans, of people who've read your writings. One of them is me. And we are so proud to have you here. We've got a lot of questions. Maybe I can take some questions and put it across so that this would benefit all those budding and interested writers.
Yes. Well, give me a selection of questions. Go up if that.
Yes. So the first question that I take from Zoom is, how do I make clues for my mystery stories, Mr. Bond?
How do I make use of my?
Make clues, CLUES, for my mystery stories.
Clues. Oh, clues.
Clues.
Yeah, it's not easy writing a mystery story, you're right. I tried a few and I wasn't very successful at them. I did try doing a detective novel, but everybody had guessed who the culprit was halfway through the book. So it's an art in itself, crime fiction, detective fiction, mystery stories. And I think my advice is that you read the best mystery writers. Take the Queen of Crime, Agatha Christie. I mean, she better than anyone else knew how to make a fool of a reader, and you thought you knew who had done it, but by the end of the book you found you were wrong reading it. So take the best writers. You could, well, all right, some people are devotees of Sherlock Holmes, some of Agatha Christie, and those are the classics. But over the years, there have been many, many writers of detective fiction. And today it is perhaps the still most popular form of fiction. Now, there are many writers of crime fiction. It has changed somewhat over the years, not so much mystery now as murder and mayhem. Very often you know who's done it, but the suspense is created by the writer having the killer perhaps do extraordinary things or just become a serial killer. Serial killers are very popular and you don't need clues to find out how they did it, because the modern writers tell you exactly how. But if you want to write an old-fashioned mystery, go to Agatha Christie, go to Guy Homage, go to Marjorie Allingham, go to John Dixon Carr. He was a specialist in closed room mysteries. A murder in a room with all the doors and windows shut from inside. So how did the killer get in? These are British mystery writers. American mystery writers are a little more. You see, in America, everybody has guns or allowed to carry them. So most of the murders are people who've been shot. Now, whereas in England, most murders, at least in books, are people who've been poisoned, Agatha Christie was a nurse, so she knew all about poisons. So learn up about poisons, or people get stabbed or banged on the head, or or thrown off cliffs, things like that. Not so much shooting, bang bang. That's America. Everybody, people prefer guns. Um, and in India, I don't know what's the most popular form of getting rid of someone. Um,
Food poison.
huh?
Food poison.
Hmm? Well, a variety of
Yeah.
a variety of methods. I think we have. So you have to study all this if you're going to write mystery
Yes.
stories. Huh? But do don't take it too seriously or experiment yourself. Huh?
That's a caveat.
Keep it all in between book covers.
So the next question, sir, is from Prabal. He's a student of class 9.
Yes.
His question is, sir, I want to ask you whether you think of a whole story before writing or it organically develops as you write the story.
Very good question. Um, with a short story, purely fiction, it's best to work it out before writing it. I'd see it in my head. I'd visualize it like a film in a way. The incidents, the characters, the dialogue, the beginning, the middle, the end. Like that, it's only a question of putting into words, good language, making it interesting. And you're not going to get bogged down or stuck in the middle and wondering how you're going to finish. So it is best to write the story in your head and then put it down on paper. It's different if you're writing nonfiction or a memoir because you're dealing then with things that have happened. And so you're not using your imagination, so you're not likely to get bogged down. Huh? But with fiction, it's best to see it in your head like a film.
Okay. The next question, let me give equal importance to people on Facebook, a lot of them there. So the next question is, how do you choose names for your characters?
Oh, well, very often I've chosen names of people I know, and later they meet me and says, "Why did you write that story about me?" Although actually I might have made it up entirely. So I think it's best not to, even if you are writing about a close friend or relative, change the name. Then people don't recognize themselves because no matter what you make them do, they think, well, it can't be me. But once you've used their name, well, then they would think it must be me. So take a name that of someone you don't know, or make up an unusual name if it's a comical character. Mr. Roundbottom or something like that would do. Comical characters do in fiction have strange name, Mr. Pickwick and Huckleberry Finn, so and so on. But for the realistic story, I guess you need fairly realistic names. And of course, in India, we have thousands of people have the same name. There are thousands of Rakeshes and Mokeshes and others. So it doesn't matter. Take a name at random. But don't take the name of a politician or a powerful man or somebody who may not like it. So keep the names to your perhaps your people who you won't mind.
So that's interesting, sir, because I come from a state called Andhra Pradesh, and in my state, every village has got a Srinivas and a Venkatesh. So yes, I mean we'll have to be very diplomatic with selection.
Only been to Vizag in Andhra Pradesh, I think. Yes, I went to Vizag. Went a very very pleasant stay there about 5 years back.
Wonderful, sir.
Well, yeah, that is Andhra Pradesh, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it is in Andhra Pradesh.
I know because there's that split between Telangana and Andhra, no?
Andhra, but all the coast is of Andhra.
This is Andhra still, yeah.
Yes. So the next question, sir, is how do you keep yourself motivated while writing a book, especially after so many years of writing?
Yes, well, it's difficult if you're writing a long book or a novel. That's why I preferred shorter works. Instead of long novels, I write novellas or short novels or short stories, stories ranging from 5 to 10,000 words. Because in a shorter work, short story, you don't lose interest or enthusiasm so quickly. If I'm fired up and I want to write a particular story, I say, I can do it in a day or two. But if I'm going to work on a long book, it can take months, and you can get tired and lose your enthusiasm. So that's why over the years I've written hundreds of stories, because they've done in short bursts. So I'm good at working in short bursts, but not long, drawn out sort of periods of dedication and concentration. Mm.
Okay.
There's one reason.
So here is a
I enjoy writing. I enjoy uh, uh, putting words together, writing. It's a compulsion in a way. Even if I wasn't getting published, I'd still be writing, because it's just something I have to do. Put myself down in words.
So we got a lot of students asking us this question. So if I were to write a fiction, what is the motivation that I must take to begin writing a fiction story?
Fiction, of course, you see, again, you might want to have a certain theme or subject in mind, and you want to to develop it, maybe, or make even a subject, a theme, better known. Uh, Some people might just want to tell a good story. Maybe most of my time I'm doing that. On the other hand, you might want to make a point, or maybe show up some sort of social um, problems, poverty or despair or something, and you can do it in the form of a story. So over the so so the history of literature actually has so many different kinds of writers. Some who wrote for entertainment, to entertain the reader. Some who wanted to write history through a work of fiction. Alexander Dumas, the Three Musketeers, or the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Um, Dickens with A Tale of Two Cities, or and so on. Otherwise, or take Dickens again. He exposed all the social evils of his time through books like Oliver Twist, and others. So he had a purpose too, in apart from wanting to write good literature. So it all depends on you, on the individual, what you want to do. You might use fiction as a purpose, as a means of conveying your ideas, or it could even be political ideas, but it could be something much simpler. In my case, my stories are personal, and it's about relationships. So different people can use fiction in different ways. Um, and maybe that's a better way of putting your ideas out than in a straightforward non-fiction work, which could be rather boring. Sometimes people would rather read it, get your ideas through a story, than through a speech or an essay.
Exactly, sir. So the next question, I would join two questions to ask this. This is perhaps from a girl of class 6, a budding young writer. Uh, so what advice do you have for little writers? And my problem is that when I write my story, later on I start getting new ideas. So what do I do to those ideas? So as she
He writes,
progresses with the story, she gets new
yeah.
ideas. So she's wondering if she can also include those ideas within the story. What if they're disconnected, and so on and so forth.
Too many ideas.
Yeah.
All those ideas jostling at once, trying to make themselves known and felt. Well, it would might just make the story a bit confusing if they keep popping in all the time. So maybe you should separate the ideas, and instead of putting 10 different ideas into one story, why not split them up and have 10 stories, using each idea as a story, which so you'd have done more that way, and achieved more in many ways. It's wonderful to have new ideas coming in all the time. I wish I did. Sometimes I'm bereft of them. So, so don't mind. So uh,
Perhaps
don't
they
be sorry.
could,
Be happy getting all those ideas.
and perhaps she could jot them down on a notebook, and they
That's
could
right.
give her ideas for a new story.
Absolutely. And another thing, a notebook is very important
Notebook,
for anyone
exactly.
who writes. Always, because you may have ideas or thoughts, but not be able to use them immediately. You might get one in the middle of the night, or while you're out having lunch with somebody, or playing a game somewhere, or taking a walk. So and maybe you can't use it immediately, but and you might forget it. So best thing is keep a notebook, jot it down in a notebook or on your phone or whatever you use, and it'll come in use later on. You see, a lot of things may not come in use immediately, but as time passes, it suddenly you find, I can use that sentence or that idea or that observation or that little incident that happened the other day.
Yes. And the next question is, you have vivid imagination, sir, but how can I use my surroundings to perhaps create stories, Mr. Bond?
Yes. How can I use my
Surroundings.
Hmm? I didn't get that word.
Surroundings.
Surroundings. Okay. Very good.
Surroundings. Yes.
Yes. Yes. You see, like you. I don't really have a very vivid imagination, which is the reason why, if I did, I'd probably be writing fantasies or science fiction. But I write a lot out of my own life because, and I use my surroundings, as you mentioned, a great deal. In fact, most of my writing comes from my immediate surroundings, about the people in my immediate surroundings, uh, past and present. I'll write about. I go back right to the past, into my childhood, uh, people I've known over the years, places I've been to or seen. All this comes into my either fiction or non-fiction, um, and so I've used everything in my life that's happened to me, or around me, or to those I know, for the very good reason that I do not have a very good imagination. So I'm using the reality, and instead of I can't write a Harry Potter or a Lord of the Rings. So I'm I'm writing The Room on the Roof, which is about how I grew up, and things like, or How to Be a Writer, which is non-fiction, or recently a memoir about how I started writing, the India I love, and so many things, all out of. I'm a personal kind of writer,
Yes.
a subjective writer, as opposed to a more objective writer. You see, I can't write a James Bond adventure story. I can only write a simple Ruskin Bond homely story. Such a different. Yeah? So you don't have to have imagination. You must, though, have a good memory and an ability to capture your surroundings and put them into words. So surroundings are all important, and your use of them is all important. So many kinds of writers.
So there's another question from a student of class 10 on Facebook. Sir, how do you pick titles for your stories and poems?
Titles are very important because a poor title can almost ruin a book. So it is important to have a good title. Mm, Um, And sometimes your publisher or editor might even make a suggestion. So sometimes you make a list of various titles, and then you choose one from that, or ask, or show them to potential readers or friends and say, which title do you think is good? Tell me which is a good title. Um, so I have changed titles over the years. A lot of famous books have had their titles changed at the last minute, just as well, perhaps. Take
Would
Gone
you
with,
like to reveal a secret?
huh?
Would you
Take
like to reveal a secret?
Yeah, an example was Gone with the Wind, a great bestseller, filmed. Its original title
Mhm.
was called Bar Bar Black Sheep. Can you imagine? Can you
Oh
imagine
my.
anybody reading it with that title, or a film being made? I think it would have killed the book.
Yeah.
So sometimes that shows how important the title it is. Huh?
Yeah.
Treasure Island was originally called The Sea Cook. Doesn't
Mhm.
sound very exciting. So it became Treasure Island before it was published. Huh? And so on. A lot of books. Room on the Roof was, I think, always the Room on the Roof. Um, then I'm trying to think of a book of mine that I might have changed the title at the last minute. Um, well, offhand, I can't. It was not important. But
Yes.
titles are important. And also the cover of a book is important, because
Mhm.
some it's all right if you have a favorite author, you pick up any book by him or her. But if it's a new author and a new book, you want to attract readers with a attractive cover. So the illustration is very important, whether it's a children's book or an adult book.
Okay. So the next question, sir, is how important is it to use attractive vocabulary, or is it okay if we use simple but meaningful vocabulary?
Simple vocabulary is best, um, unless you've got a very eccentric character who's got certain characteristics where you want to capture them. Otherwise, it's best with simple. You see, now, if I'm writing a story set in the hills and set in a village, now I'm writing in English. Now, some of the characters in the story might be farmers or villagers who wouldn't know English. They'd be talking either in Hindi or their local dialect or Bengali. So, but I'm writing in English. So, so I best is I, I I use the as simple as possible the dialogue, so that the reader knows what they're saying, and I could say that they're speaking in their own language, but this is what they were saying, and then I give the dialogue. So uh, because obviously you can't in a written story give the accent or the inflection or the uh, idiosyncrasies of the speaker that will come in a film or in a play where the actor should use a particular form of speech to engage the audience. But in the written word, you're not here. It's not audible unless somebody is reading the story, and then he can actually give it a certain difference. And of course, if I'm say reading out David Copperfield on the radio, or giving a reading in public, and I will come to Mr. Micawber speaking, or Mr. Dick, or Aunt Betsy Trotwood, I would of course change my voice and try and use an actor's voice. Uh, but when you're reading, uh, it's best, at least in when to keep it simple, especially when you're writing about people who would not normally be talking in English.
Exactly.
Mm.
And great thoughts there, sir. Next question is uh, the question is, Mr. Bond, how to write non-fiction books that can bring non-bookworms to read the books?
Um, Yes, that's interesting. You're right, because as a boy, I did read a lot of fiction and stories and novels, and I kept putting off nonfiction um, until I discovered perhaps stories set in faraway places, nonfiction or adventure stories or travel books, and found them interesting. And then I enjoyed reading nonfiction too. Also, I enjoyed, if you have a favorite author, usually somebody from the past,
Yes.
you might like to read a biography of that author, um, or a biography of any well-known or famous person who's achieved and done something in life, because it can be inspiring in a way. So biographies can be very interesting for anyone who's interested in literature and in writing. So if you say you're fond of reading Sherlock Holmes stories, so why not read a biography of Conan Doyle, who wrote them, because his life was just as interesting. Um, he used to even conjure up ghosts. He was a psychic character. Or if you take Agatha Christie, she wrote all those fascinating novels. You read her story, it's equally interesting. She even disappeared for a week. Nobody knew where she went, and she never told us when she came back. So writers too have interesting lives. Most people who've done something interesting in life have. So biographies can be fascinating if they're well written. Autobiographies too. Only autobiography, when you're writing your own story, so you're inclined maybe to keep something back or not reveal everything. So, but a good biography written usually after the subject has passed away would be very fascinating to see how that person got got to where he finally
Came to be.
arrived in life.
Yes. So the next question, sir, is how do you describe a character? How do you know that the character looks that specific?
Oh, that's, yeah. You can overdo it. It's describing the character, especially when he first comes into the story, into the novel, or onto the scene. You want to present him straight away. You want the reader to get a picture of that character. So maybe it's done not simply by describing what he's wearing, or that he's got gray hair or black hair or whatever, but maybe an expression, or he has a limp, or he stutters, or there's just something unusual about him. So if you can uh, draw on that aspect of the character and present it in the beginning, then the reader will have a picture in his mind, which will stay with him through the story. And then you don't have to keep describing that person.
So now adding on to this characterization, sir, this is something that I wanted to ask any author if I had met one, and I'm so lucky to have met you. Is when you conceive characters and when you write, you literally get into the body of that particular character. How do you stay from being affected by the emotions of a particular character?
The emotions. Yeah. Well, you want to present the emotions of the character, and you have to do it sometimes through dialogue, um, and or your own emotional response to a character, which if you're writing in the first person, as many of my stories are written, it's perhaps easier. You're giving your own response. But when you have a number of, you're writing in the third person, and if you have the response from different people to a character, it can be quite difficult. Um, so it's really a question of practice over a period of time. The more you write, the more you present different characters, um, the better you will do it. And also keep reading the masters, the great writers, how they do it.
Okay, I request Ms. Rageshri to take the last next question, and then Ms. Rageshri? Yes.
Yes, sure. Thank you for being here, Mr. Bond. It's a real pleasure to interact with you and answer and you having to answer so many questions. I understand.
I enjoy doing it. Only my throat
Yes,
goes up.
yeah, completely understandable. But there are so many young people over here who are aspiring to be authors and writers, and they look towards you for as an inspiration, and and they admire your work. And we have been getting so many comments on Facebook and on Zoom that they love each and every book of yours, be it a Blue Umbrella.
I'm
Yes.
very lucky to have. I'm very lucky to have.
Yes, so they love you.
somebody,
We all love you from our bottom of our hearts. And yeah, we are so thankful that you continue to write and we continue to read you. And your upcoming book, which is How to Be a Writer, I think that will serve as an inspiration to a lot of us
I
and a lot of our young readers. Yes,
I, anyway, it's quite amusing. So
yes.
even if it doesn't, if you don't like it, pass it on to somebody else.
It will definitely help all the young people that we have here and who are aspiring to be authors. So just one last question, that do you have any favorite genre of yours that that you like writing about?
Oh, yeah, I've tried different genres over the years.
Yeah.
Um, I've written about children's adventures, either children in towns or in villages having fun and adventures, like as in the Hidden Pool or the Blue Umbrella. But I've also done a certain amount of autobiography from my own life. Then I've done, just for fun, ghost stories.